John Mitchell was used to strange things happening in the diplomatic world. Being Earth's youngest ambassador to the Galactic Council meant that he was no stranger to alien cultures, their customs, and even their quirks. But nothing could have prepared him for his latest assignment, negotiating with the Corindians. The Corindians were unlike any species John had ever encountered. Their silver skin gleamed like polished metal, and their eyes, glowing softly with an ethereal blue light, seemed to look straight into a person's soul. They were tall, graceful, and always exuded an aura of calm, one that made their every word feel weighty and important. John had studied their culture extensively, but nothing in his research had prepared him for Neriel. She was the representative of the Corindians for this mission, and as soon as John met her, he was immediately struck by her appearance. Neriel had long, flowing silver hair that seemed to shimmer in the light, and her delicate features radiated an elegance that left John almost speechless. But what caught his attention even more than her beauty was her eyes. They weren't just glowing blue, they seemed to be alive with knowledge and depth, as if they had seen centuries of history unfold before them. The first time he met her in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council hub, she greeted him with a polite bow, as was customary among her people. She was formal and composed, her telepathic communication flowing effortlessly between them, allowing for smooth dialogue without a single word being spoken aloud. Yet there was something odd. Every time their eyes met, Neriel's cheeks would turn the faintest shade of pink. John wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but he couldn't ignore the strange flicker of color that appeared on her silver skin. The Corindians didn't blush, at least that's what John thought. Their species was known for its deep control over emotions, never allowing any sign of weakness to show. But Neriel, for reasons John couldn't explain, would blush whenever their gazes met. It wasn't an intense flush, but rather a soft, almost imperceptible pink hue that vanished as quickly as it appeared. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, maybe a result of her glowing skin. But as their meetings continued, the blushes became more frequent, and he began to wonder if something else was going on. John couldn't resist the urge to ask his mentor, Ambassador Taylor, about it. Taylor had been assigned to him for guidance, especially since this was his first major diplomatic mission. The older ambassador, a seasoned veteran of galactic politics, seemed to know everything about every species. "Ambassador Taylor, there's something strange about Neriel," John said one evening as they sat in the council building's lounge, sipping on synthetic coffee. "Whenever we meet, she blushes. I've never seen an alien do that before. I thought the Corindians were all about control, never showing emotion." Taylor looked over the rim of his cup, a mischievous smile tugging at his lips. "You're right," he said with a chuckle. "The Corindians are usually as stoic as a rock. But perhaps you've managed to stir something in Neriel that no one else has." He winked. "Let me tell you something about humans, John. We have a way of surprising others, and maybe that's exactly what you've done." John frowned, unsure of what Taylor meant. He had never considered himself charming, especially not to an alien species. But now that he thought about it, there was something about Neriel's blush that seemed more personal than diplomatic. Could it be that she was reacting to something more than just the negotiations? As the days passed, John and Neriel continued their work. Their meetings became increasingly frequent, and the tone of their discussions shifted. At first, it was all about trade agreements, mineral exchanges, and technical matters that seemed far beyond John's understanding. But as they spent more time together, their conversations veered toward more personal topics. Neriel was intelligent, well-spoken, and deeply knowledgeable about her species' history and culture. John admired her wisdom, and he found himself learning more from her than he had ever imagined. But it wasn't just her knowledge that intrigued him, it was her presence. There was something about the way she spoke, the way she carried herself, that drew him in. Still, the blushes remained. Every time they shared a moment of eye contact, Neriel's cheeks would glow with that soft pink hue. At first, John thought it was just a passing thing, but it continued, and with each passing day, it seemed to become more noticeable. He couldn't ignore it anymore. It was real, and it was happening every time they met. One day, after a particularly long negotiation session, John found himself walking with Neriel through the corridors of the Galactic Council hub. They were discussing the specifics of the trade deal, but John was distracted as usual by her occasional blushes, "Neriel, can I ask you something?" John said, his voice more tentative than he intended. She turned her glowing blue eyes toward him, a slight tilt of her head indicating she was listening. Her telepathic link was so strong that he could feel her thoughts brushing against his own. It was like a warm, comforting presence, one that he had grown accustomed to in their time together. "What is it, Ambassador Mitchell?" she asked, her voice calm and even. "I've noticed something," John began, trying to choose his words carefully. "Whenever we meet, well, you seem to blush. I've never seen a Corindian do that before. Is everything all right?" Neriel blinked, her eyes widening slightly as she processed his question. For a moment she said nothing, and John felt a strange silence settle between them. Then slowly she spoke again. I am not sure," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I have never experienced anything like this before. My species does not react the way you do. We are trained to control our emotions, to remain calm and composed at all times. But with you, Ambassador, something is different." John's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected such an honest response. "What do you mean?" he asked, his curiosity growing. Neriel hesitated before speaking again. "I do not fully understand it myself," she admitted. "But when we speak, when I look at you, I feel something unexpected. It is a sensation I have never encountered before. It is warm, and it makes my heart race in a way I do not understand. I believe this is what you humans call emotion." John blinked in surprise. "You mean to say that you're feeling emotions?" Neriel nodded slowly, her silver hair catching the light. "Yes, and I do not know how to control them. They confuse me." John's mind raced. He had heard about how the Corindians valued logic and emotionlessness, but hearing this from Neriel herself was something else entirely. Was it possible that a simple human ambassador could cause an alien, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, to experience something as raw and human as emotion? Before John could ask more questions, Neriel took a deep breath and her expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "But we must continue our negotiations," she said, her voice steady again like the calm surface of a lake. "We cannot let personal matters interfere." John was left standing there, stunned by her revelation. He had expected their conversations to be about business, but now everything had changed. He couldn't deny the connection he felt with Neriel, but he wasn't sure where it would lead. All he knew was that he wanted to understand more about her and perhaps about the emotions that now seemed to be blossoming between them. The days passed and the air between John and Neriel grew thicker with unspoken words. Despite their professional duties, something intangible had formed between them. It was like an invisible thread, a connection that neither could deny even if they didn't fully understand it. John couldn't stop thinking about their last conversation. Neriel had confessed that she was experiencing emotions, something her species was not accustomed to. The thought of it lingered in his mind during every meeting, every glance. Her soft blushes, which had started as subtle hints of color, had become more frequent, more noticeable. Each time their eyes met, Neriel's cheeks flushed a shade of pale pink, and John found himself wondering why and what it meant. For the next few days, their meetings were more intense. The negotiations had reached a critical point. The trade deal they were discussing wasn't just about minerals and technology. It had the potential to change the course of human and Corindian relations for generations. John was determined to make it work. But as the discussions became more complex, so did his feelings toward Neriel. He wanted to understand her, but he also found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't anticipated. One evening, after another long and draining session of negotiations, they found themselves walking through the corridors of the Galactic Council hub once again. The sleek walls hummed with the energy of the building, the soft lights casting long shadows along the polished floors. This time the silence between them was heavier, not just from the weight of diplomacy but from something deeper. Neriel seemed distracted, her usual calm demeanor wavering. She walked beside John, but her eyes were focused on the floor as though she were trying to hide something. John couldn't help but notice the way her steps faltered slightly. She was usually so composed, so graceful, but tonight something was different. "Neriel," John said gently, stopping in his tracks. "Are you all right?" She paused, her silver hair shimmering under the lights. For a moment she didn't answer, and John began to wonder if she would shut him out again like she had done a few times since their last conversation. But then she looked up at him, her blue eyes deep and searching. I am not sure, she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. I have been thinking about what we discussed the other day about emotions. She hesitated, her gaze flickering away for a moment before returning to him. I do not understand it, John. I have lived my entire life without knowing this feeling. But now with you, I cannot stop it. John's heart skipped a beat. There was something so vulnerable in her voice, so real, that he felt the pull of their connection deepen. He stepped closer, his tone soft. Nereal, he said, trying to find the right words. It's okay. You don't have to understand it all right now. Emotions are complicated. We humans, well, we don't always know what they mean either. He smiled slightly, trying to reassure her. But we learn. We figure it out as we go along. She seemed to consider his words, and for the first time, John saw a hint of doubt in her eyes. It was small, but it was there. It made her look human. I have never been like this, she said almost to herself. Our species, my people, are not like yours. We do not feel the way humans do. We do not understand why you laugh or cry or get angry. Our emotions are controlled, regulated. They are not allowed to interfere with our thinking. But when I am with you, it is as though something inside me wants to break free. Her voice quivered slightly, betraying a hint of the turmoil she felt. John felt his chest tighten. He didn't know what to say. What could he say? He was just a human. An ambassador, yes, but still someone who had no real experience with the complexities of a species so different from his own. I don't want you to feel like you have to hide anything. Nereal, John said softly, stepping a little closer. If you're feeling something, anything, it's okay. It's just human nature. Nereal looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and confusion. But I am not human. And you are not a Corindian. What are we doing, John? John's heart skipped again. Her words felt like an admission of something deeper, something she hadn't been willing to acknowledge until now. He didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to pull away, not now. Not when things were just beginning to make sense. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think we're figuring it out together. There was a long silence. They both stood there, the faint hum of the building's energy system surrounding them, and for a moment it felt like the entire galaxy had paused. Time had stopped, and it was just the two of them. After a long while, Nereal took a deep breath and straightened, her posture regaining its usual grace. But the soft blush still lingered on her cheeks, and John could see the way her hands fidgeted at her sides, a small sign of the turmoil she was feeling. He had never seen her like this before. I should go, Nereal said abruptly, her voice firm once more, though it lacked the usual certainty. There is much work to be done, and we still have to finalize the agreement. John nodded, though he felt the sudden distance between them. Of course. We'll meet again tomorrow. You can count on me. Without another word, Nereal turned and walked away, her silver form blending into the shadows of the corridor. John watched her go, a knot of confusion and longing forming in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that something had changed between them, something deeper than just diplomacy. He couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, nor the way her confession had shifted something inside him. The following days passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations, but the space between John and Nereal seemed to grow wider. She became even more distant, retreating into her cool professional demeanor as if trying to regain control over whatever was happening between them. John could feel it, though, an invisible barrier that wasn't there before. But he wasn't ready to give up. He knew that Nereal was struggling with emotions that she didn't understand, and he wanted to be there for her, even if it was just as a friend. He couldn't let her deal with it all alone. One day, after another long meeting, John found himself in the council building's atrium, waiting for Nereal to finish up her latest report. It was a massive room, filled with holographic displays of galactic systems and intricate maps, all floating in the air like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be put together. John stood near the far wall, his arms crossed, when he saw Nereal approaching, her expression as unreadable as ever. But there was something in the way she walked, a hesitation in her steps, that made him pause. Nereal, he called softly, taking a step forward. She stopped, looking at him, her expression flickering with something he couldn't place. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and John's heart raced in his chest. I'm sorry, Nereal finally said, her voice low. I have been avoiding you. I don't know how to handle this connection, these emotions. She sighed, the weight of the words heavy in the air. But I can't ignore it anymore. I can't pretend that nothing is happening. Not when you're here. John felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The moment when things might finally change. He stepped closer, his voice soft. It's okay, Neriel, he said, reaching out just enough to bridge the distance between them. We don't have to have all the answers, but we can figure it out together. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes glowing softly, her expression unreadable. But then, ever so slightly, the faintest pink blush crept onto her cheeks again. And in that moment, John knew that whatever was happening between them, whatever this was, had only just begun. The days following their conversation were different. John could feel the tension between him and Neriel growing, but it wasn't the kind of tension that came from an argument or a misunderstanding. It was something deeper, an emotional current that neither of them could ignore. The closer they got, the more complicated things became. Neriel had started to open up to him in her own way, but it was clear she was still struggling with what was happening between them. John had noticed that during their meetings, Neriel seemed more distant than usual. Her responses were shorter, her eyes less focused on him, but when their gazes met, the familiar blush would appear on her silver cheeks. It made John's heart race, but he knew something wasn't right. There was something Neriel wasn't telling him. She was holding something back. He had tried to reach out to her, but every time he asked her how she was feeling, she would quickly change the subject or brush it off with an excuse. But John knew better. He could sense it. Something was bothering her, and he was determined to find out what it was. The final day of their negotiations arrived, and they were preparing to sign the trade agreement. It was a historic moment for both Earth and the Corindians, one that would change the course of galactic history. But as John stood in the grand meeting room, preparing for the final discussions, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Neriel's behavior than just a simple diplomatic relationship. As the meeting began, John glanced across the table at Neriel, who was sitting with her hands folded in front of her, her expression as composed as ever. Her silver skin glowed under the soft lights, but the familiar pink blush was absent. Her eyes were locked on the documents in front of her, not meeting John's gaze. John felt a pang of frustration. He knew this wasn't just about trade deals or negotiations anymore. It was about them, the connection they shared, the emotions Neriel was struggling to understand, and the truth she wasn't ready to face. He couldn't let it go any longer. After the meeting concluded, as everyone filed out of the room, John made his way toward Neriel. She was already standing by the large windows, her back to him as she gazed out at the vast city below. The view was stunning, with the sprawling metropolis lit up in shades of blue and purple, but it didn't capture John's attention. All he could focus on was Neriel, the woman who had captured his heart without him even realizing it. Neriel, he said softly, walking up beside her. We need to talk. She turned to face him, her expression neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she clenched her fists at her sides. About the agreement? She asked, her voice calm but distant. John shook his head. No, about us. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, and for a moment she looked as if she might turn away again. But something in his gaze made her hesitate. She sighed deeply and looked out the window again as if gathering her thoughts. I don't know what's happening between us, John. She admitted quietly. I've never felt like this before. I've never been confused like this. Her voice wavered for a moment, and John could see the vulnerability in her eyes. I know, he said, his voice steady. I feel it too. But Neriel, this isn't just about the trade deal anymore. This is about something else, about us, about what we're both feeling. Neriel shook her head, her silver hair shimmering in the soft light. I don't understand what I'm feeling, she said. I've spent my entire life learning to control everything inside me. Emotions are something we don't experience the way you do. I've never felt this way about anyone, especially not a human. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to make sense of what she was saying. John took a deep breath, trying to choose his words carefully. It's okay to feel something, Neriel. You don't have to understand it right away, but you can't keep pretending that it doesn't exist. It's real, and I think you know that. For a long moment, Neriel didn't say anything. Her gaze drifted back to the cityscape outside the window, her mind clearly elsewhere. John watched her, the silence between them stretching on. feeling as if every second that passed was another step toward breaking whatever invisible wall she had put up between them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft and hesitant. "John, I am afraid." John's heart tightened in his chest. He had been expecting this. He had known all along that there was something deeper behind Neriel's hesitation, something that went beyond just emotions. "What are you afraid of?" he asked, taking a step closer. She turned to face him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I'm afraid that if I let these emotions take control, if I let them in, I'll lose everything. My people, my position, my duty. The Corindians are a species of logic and order. If I allow myself to feel like you do, it might destroy everything I've worked for." John's expression softened and he reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. "Neriel, you don't have to choose between who you are and what you feel. You're not alone in this. I won't let you go through this by yourself. We can figure this out together." For the first time in days, Neriel's composure faltered. Her hand trembled under his and she took a step back, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. "But I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can trust these feelings. I've been taught to suppress them my entire life." John's heart ached at her words. He could see the internal battle raging within her, the conflict between the emotions she was feeling and the strict upbringing of her people. It was clear that she was torn between her duty and the connection they shared. "You don't have to fight it, Neriel," he said gently. "You don't have to suppress everything. You don't have to control it all the time. Let yourself feel. Let yourself live." There was a long pause, and for a moment John thought she might walk away. But then Neriel did something he hadn't expected. She reached out, her hand finding his, and for the first time she didn't pull away. She held on. "I don't know what this means, John," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "But I think I want to find out." John smiled softly, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "We'll figure it out, Neriel. We'll do it together." As the minutes passed, the weight of the moment didn't lift, but it felt different now. The distance between them had closed, and the connection they shared was no longer something they could deny. Whatever they were feeling, whatever they were about to face, it was something they would face together. But even as the moment felt like a small victory, John knew that there was more to come. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Neriel's struggle with her emotions was far from over, and the consequences of her decisions weighed heavily on both of them. But for the first time, John felt hope. Hope that they could break through the barriers that had been built by centuries of tradition, and that they could create something new. Together, the tension between John and Neriel had not lessened since their conversation. If anything, it had grown more intense, more palpable. There was a sense of anticipation in the air whenever they were in the same room. Neither of them could avoid the growing connection, the bond that seemed to tie their fates together. But the more John thought about it, the more he realized that the journey they had started was far from over. If they were going to make it, they would have to confront everything standing in their way, their differences, their doubts, and most of all, their fears. The final signing of the trade agreement was fast approaching. The stakes were higher than ever before. The deal was historic, not just for the Corindians and humanity, but for the future of galactic diplomacy. Yet even as the date of the signing drew closer, John couldn't help but feel that something was about to change, not just with the agreement, but with him and Neriel. For days, they continued to meet in the council building's grand chambers, finalizing every detail. Their conversations were now a mixture of business and something else, something neither of them could put into words. The subtle touches, the brief glances that lingered a little too long, and the moments of silence that spoke volumes. But Neriel had become even more withdrawn. It wasn't like before when she would shy away from her emotions or quickly redirect the conversation. Now she seemed to be shutting down entirely. She no longer blushed when John caught her gaze, but instead she wore the same neutral expression, as though the warmth they once shared was slipping away. John could see it. She was holding something back, and it was hurting both of them. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of finalizing the deal, John found himself alone in the building's atrium, staring out at the alien city below. The lights of the metropolis twinkled like stars, and the night sky above was a deep shade of indigo. He took a slow breath, trying to steady his thoughts. He had to make a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to confront Neriel once and for all to break the wall that had formed between them. As he stood there, Lost in his thoughts, he felt a presence behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "John." Nyriel's voice was soft, almost tentative. "May I speak with you?" He turned slowly, his heart beating faster in his chest. She was standing there, her silver skin glowing faintly under the lights, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, something he couldn't ignore. A storm of emotions was hidden just beneath the surface. "Of course," John said, his voice steady. "We need to talk." Nyriel hesitated for a moment before walking closer, her steps almost silent on the polished floor. "I know I've been distant," she said quietly, her eyes focused on the ground. "I've been trying to push these emotions aside, but I can't anymore. I can't ignore what I'm feeling. Not when you're here." John's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. "Nyriel," he said, taking a step closer. "You don't have to fight it. You don't have to fight what you feel. It's okay to feel, to embrace what's happening between us." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. "But I don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to handle you." Her voice trembled slightly. "I've spent my entire life learning to suppress everything. And now I'm afraid of losing control." John reached out, gently taking her hand. "You don't have to control everything, Nyriel. You don't have to shut yourself off. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to collect herself, then slowly, she opened them again, meeting his gaze. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You won't," John said firmly. "I'm not afraid of what we're feeling. I'm not afraid of you." The words seemed to hang in the air between them like a promise. Nyriel's grip on his hand tightened slightly, and for the first time in days, John saw a flicker of the warmth that had once been there. She wasn't hiding anymore. "I'm scared, John," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what this means. I don't know what to do with these feelings." John stepped closer, his heart racing. "It doesn't have to mean anything yet, Nyriel. We can take it slow. We don't have to have all the answers. We can figure it out together." Nyriel stared at him, her blue eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "Together?" she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes," John said, nodding. "We're in this together." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of her confession hung in the air, and John could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on both of them. But in that silence, something shifted. The wall that had been between them was crumbling piece by piece, and in its place was something new, a fragile but undeniable connection. Nyriel's expression softened, and a small tentative smile appeared on her lips. It was the first time in what felt like forever that she smiled like that. John's chest tightened with relief, and he squeezed her hand gently. "I think I'm ready to let go," Nyriel said quietly. "Ready to see where this takes us?" John smiled back, his heart lifting. "Then let's take this one step at a time." With that, they stood there together, hand in hand, their gazes locked in a silent understanding. It wasn't going to be easy. The path ahead would be full of challenges, and there were still many obstacles to overcome. But in that moment, they had broken through the barriers that had once kept them apart. They had faced their fears and chosen to embrace the unknown together. As they stood in the atrium, the distant sound of footsteps interrupted their quiet moment. It was a reminder that their journey wasn't over. There was still the matter of the trade agreement to finalize. But for now, it didn't matter. For the first time, John realized that the trade deal wasn't the most important thing. What mattered was the connection he shared with Nyriel, the bond that had formed between them, a bond that had transcended species, culture, and logic. The sound of the footsteps grew louder, and soon a voice called from the doorway. "Ambassador Mitchell, the signing ceremony is ready." John looked at Nyriel one last time, his eyes filled with determination and hope. "It's time," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Let's do this together." Nyriel nodded, a quiet smile playing on her lips. She was no longer the distant, stoic diplomat he had first met. She was something more now, someone he had come to understand and care for deeply. And together, they would face whatever came next, side by side. As they walked toward the doors, ready to sign the agreement that would change the course of history, John felt a sense of peace settle over him. No matter the challenges ahead, he knew that they would face them together. And that, he thought, was enough.